Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you. Let's begin with our top focus. Every new day brings alarming events that continue to raise the spectre of a wider regional conflict in the Middle East, even as the Israel-Hamas war rages in Gaza. Now, Pakistan has expelled Iran's ambassador, recalled its own envoy from Tehran and suspended all high-level visits, ongoing or planned, amid growing tensions over Iranian airstrikes on the Pakistani province of Balochistan that took place on Tuesday. A Pakistan Foreign Office spokesperson said Pakistan has decided to recall its ambassador from Iran, and the Iranian ambassador to Pakistan, who is currently visiting Iran, may not return for the time being. Earlier, Pakistan had strongly condemned an Iranian airstrike in the Balochistan province targeting the Jaish al-Adl terror group. Tehran has blamed this group for attacks on its security forces along the 1,000-kilometer-long border that the two countries share. Pakistan said the attack that killed 2 children was an unprovoked violation of its airspace, and it warned of retaliation and serious consequences. Iran said it used precision missiles and drone strikes to destroy 2 strongholds of the Sunni militant group in Pakistan's southwest Balochistan province. The attack comes a day after Iran launched missiles in northern Iraq and Syria. This is being seen as the latest escalation of hostilities in the Middle East, where Israel's ongoing war in Gaza risks spiraling into a wider regional conflagration. Pakistan described the airstrike as an unprovoked violation of its airspace by Iran inside Pakistani territory. The foreign minister said it's even more concerning that this illegal act has taken place despite the existence of several channels of communication between Pakistan and Iran. Following the strike, Pakistan lodged a strong protest with Iran's foreign ministry and called on the Iranian charge d'affaires, saying the responsibility for the consequences will lie squarely with Iran. Last month, Iran had accused Jaish al-Adl militants of storming a police station in the Iranian province of Sistan in Balochistan, which resulted in the deaths of 11 Iranian police officers. Jaish al-Adl, meaning Army of Justice, is a militant organization which operates on both sides of the border and has previously claimed responsibility for attacks against Iranian targets. Its stated goal is the independence of Iran's Sistan and Balochistan province. The strikes in Pakistan came a day after Iran's Revolutionary Guards launched ballistic missiles targeting what it claimed was a spy base for Israel's intelligence agency Mossad in Erbil in northern Iraq and at anti-Iran terror groups in Syria. According to Iran, the strikes in Iraq were in response to Israeli attacks that killed Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders, and those targeted in Syria were involved in the recent dual bombings in the city of Kerman during a memorial for the slain Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani that left almost 200 people dead and scores of others wounded. ISIS had claimed responsibility for those deadly twin blasts, the deadliest attack in Iran since its 1979 revolution. Iran defended the strikes as a precise and targeted operation to deter security threats. The IRGC says Iran's first direct military strike in the region linked to the Gaza war was in response to Israeli atrocities against several of its commanders and those of Iranian allied forces around the Middle East since the Israel-Hamas conflict began. Israeli Prime Minister Mohammad Shia al-Sundani said Iran's attack was clear aggression against Iraq and a dangerous development that undermined the strong relationship between Tehran and Baghdad. In protest, Iraq recalled its ambassador from Iran. Iran's attacks have further raised fears that Israel's war in Gaza could widen into a full-scale war in the Middle East with grave humanitarian, political and economic consequences. The attacks in Iraq and Syria were condemned by the US as reckless and imprecise. The United Nations said security concerns must be addressed through dialogue, not strikes. Iraq has submitted a complaint to the UN Security Council over this issue. The Iraqi Foreign Minister Fuad Hussein has said there are no Mossad-affiliated centers operating in Erbil in the semi-autonomous Kurdistan region. Israel's relentless bombing of Gaza in response to Hamas's 7th October terror attacks has killed more than 24,000 people, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, and of course wreaked widespread devastation as civilians live with the threat of imminent death, either by an airstrike, starvation or disease. The conflict has escalated hostilities across the region with Iran's allies and proxies, the so-called axis of resistance, launching attacks on Israeli forces and its allies. US troops in Iraq and Syria have repeatedly come under rocket and drone attacks from Tehran's proxies. Last week, the US carried out a strike in Baghdad that killed a leader from an Iran-backed proxy group that Washington blamed for attacks against US personnel in the region. Some have expressed concern that Iraq could again become a theatre for regional conflict after the US strikes. Also, fighting has intensified between Israel and the powerful Iran-backed group Hezbollah across the Lebanon border. On Sunday, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah vowed to press on with confrontations with Israeli forces on the Lebanon border until the end of the Israeli offensive in Gaza. On Monday, a Houthi missile hit a US-owned cargo ship in the Red Sea, marking the first time that these militants successfully struck a US-owned or operated ship. On Tuesday, the US military launched new strikes against Houthi targets inside Yemen, targeting anti-ship ballistic missiles controlled by the Iran-backed rebel group. A few hours later, the Houthis launched a missile into international shipping lanes in the southern Red Sea, hitting a Maltese-flagged bulk carrier. The strikes are at least the third round of attacks that the US military has launched against the Houthis' infrastructure since last Thursday, when the US and the UK conducted a joint operation that targeted the command and control nodes and weapons depots used by the Houthis to launch missile and drone attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. In a bid to cut off their funding and supply of weapons, US President Joe Biden's administration plans to put Houthis back on the list of global terrorist organizations. There have been many such developments over the last few days. Last week, a senior Hezbollah commander was killed in an Israeli drone strike on his car in southern Lebanon. Wissam Tawil was the most senior member of the Shiite militant group to be killed in an Israeli strike since Hezbollah and Israel began trading fire across the Lebanese-Israeli border on the 8th of October. Israel is also suspected of carrying out an attack on high-ranking Hamas leader Saleh al-Aruri in the Lebanese capital Beirut, sparking fury amongst Hezbollah leaders who control the area where he was killed. All these events have significantly deepened worries about worsening instability across the Middle East since the war between Israel and Hamas began on the 7th of October, with Iran's proxies also entering the fray now from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq and Yemen.
So I'm not going to speculate on reports coming from beyond our borders. What I will say is that Iran continues to use its proxies to attack Israel on multiple fronts. We condemn Iran's activities and we call on the international community to stand up in defiance of Iran and call for peace in the region as soon as possible.
Nous avons mené une action résolue.
We have carried out a resolute action, and I must say unprecedented for a Western country since the beginning. Firstly, by deploying military resources, and particularly the Dixmude, which has already made it possible to treat more than 1,000 adult and child patients within the extraordinary dedication of the doctors who are present, taking turns on this one, and with outstanding cooperation with Egypt. We have 1,000 tons of fright medicines which have been delivered, and we have in fact in recent weeks put in place very delicate operations to deliver aid in the Gaza Strip itself. Last January 3, we carried out an operation with the Jordanians to drop food rations on the Gaza Strip, and we are in process of taking action with Qatar. We have started to act to deliver medicines to Gaza Strip, and we will continue to do so with all the partners in the region who are helping us with humanitarian action, who have greatly mobilized our military and our diplomats, and on which we are also working with many associations and NGOs who have been absolutely outstanding on this.
Absolument exemplaire dans cette action.
All right. So, to make sense of what's happening in the Middle East, let's now go across to our guest joining me on the show tonight. Itai Melchior, researcher, Middle East and Africa Affairs, joining us live from Haifa in Israel. Welcome back, Itai. Nusrat Amin, senior journalist in Pakistan, joining us live from Karachi. And completing the panel tonight is Major General Sanjay Meston, defense and geopolitical expert, joining us from New Delhi. Gentlemen, welcome to Global Lens. I will come to you in just a moment. Before that, I need to slip into a quick break. On the other side, a complete analysis of exactly what's going on in the Middle East.
"392 pillars, 44 doors. Prime Minister prays ahead of the big moment. Special rituals in Ayodhya. All eyes on Ram Lalla.
पूरी दुनिया उत्सुकता के साथ 22 जनवरी के ऐतिहासिक क्षण का इंतजार कर रही है।
Pran Pratishtha. Rolling coverage. Only on News9 Live.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. I wanted to go across to our Pakistani guest, but I believe we have a bit of a problem with his line there. We will reestablish connection with Nusrat Amin. Before that, let me go across to Itai Melchior. Itai Melchior, for days and weeks now, we've been asking one fundamental question amongst many others on Global Lens. Does the Israel-Hamas war threaten to escalate into a much wider regional conflict? You know, today, when you look at all the events that I have just recounted at the start of my show, you would almost think that this is a rhetorical question now. Because if that was one of our worst fears, it seems to be already coming true. Just look at the number of conflicts that seem to have emerged in the Middle East in the immediate aftermath and as a direct fallout of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. What's your take?
Well, Neha, good to be back on the show. I want to start, I don't like disagreeing, but I beg to differ, because if we look at the different conflicts and the different scenes we're looking at, then we see that there is one country in common to all of these events, and it's not Israel. I remind you that Iran targeting Pakistan or targeting Syria is totally unrelated to Israel. They claim their attack on Iraq was related to Israel, but we know that is not true. And in the end, they are the ones directing the Houthis to fire at the ships on sea, and the ones behind the Hamas attack on Israel. Israel did not initiate anything, and we see that every arena that there is an activity in, the people to start it are the Iranians. So I think that this country, Israel, did not want a war with Hamas. Israel did not just decide one day to get up in the morning and attack Gaza. It was blatantly and brutally and inhumanely attacked. Its civilians are still held captive and hostage. Some of them now known to be dead. More than 100 civilians still being held captive. We did not want this war, and we are not the ones who are stirring up the region. Really, Israel has nothing to do with the Iran, Pakistan, Iran, Syria, Iran, Iraq. And we really are not the ones who want any fighting. We value human lives, and we want to keep doing what we do best, which is bring the world innovation and health and agro-technology and other good things, which is what we specialize in.
Okay, well, Itai Melchior, you may say that most of these developments have nothing to do with Israel, but I think most experts and observers will beg to differ with you, because most seem to think that all these events that are unfolding are a direct fallout of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. Let me now go across to our Pakistani guest. I will come back to you. Itai, give me a moment. I will come back to you. I want to go across now to our Pakistani guest, Nusrat Amin, senior journalist who joins us from Karachi. Nusrat Amin, welcome to Global Lens. Now, Pakistan has warned Iran of serious consequences and retaliation after the airstrike in Baluchistan, where two children were killed. Pakistan has expelled the Iranian ambassador and recalled its own envoy from Tehran. What, according to you, explains the growing tension between Pakistan and Iran? Does this come as a surprise to you? And do you believe that there could also be some sort of military retaliation by Pakistan?
It's of course not something very surprising to anyone. I mean, the one who has been following the history, and without assessing who is right and who is wrong, if you go by the history of bilateral relations and bilateral issues between Iran and Pakistan, you will see so many incidents of geopolitical border violation and airspace violation has been committed from across the border, from the western, I mean, from Iranian border. The spy that alleged to have been an Indian spy who was arrested and detained in Pakistan still is have said to have crossed the border through Iran, and some Al-Qaeda people also, some other militant also have been reported to be on the other side of the border and infiltrated into this region, into this country, Pakistan. So I think this is something least that one can expect. What Pakistan has done, I think. What I assess out of the recent development is this is something that strongly hints at Pakistan's intention to deal with the issue on a bilateral level through negotiation.
Okay, you believe that Pakistan is going to address this through negotiations. Of course, it has taken a very strong diplomatic step of expelling Tehran's envoy and recalling its own envoy to Iran.
Yeah, that's right. They have expelled the Iranian diplomat and they have recalled theirs. So it means that they don't have any intention to involve military. I think they are going to deal with the case on diplomatic.
Okay.
Strictly though, very strictly though.
You do not believe there will be any military reaction. They want to deal with this at a diplomatic level. But let me ask you a larger question, Nusrat Amin, before I go across to my Indian guest. Because for over 3 months now, we have discussed the Israel-Hamas war here on this show day after day. Do you believe that the multiple conflicts, I'm not referring to what's happened between Pakistan and Iran in particular, but the various events that have unfolded in the Middle East in the last several weeks, are they a worrying sign that the Israel-Hamas war is indeed escalating into a much wider regional conflict, if not yet a full-blown war in the Middle East?
Actually, there are certain regions in this world where nations impact each other, like Central Asia, like North Africa, like Middle East. If anything happens in one country, it sometimes engulfs the others also. But you have asked this question, I think earlier, talking to the gentleman from Middle East. I think I would disagree with this point that yesterday's strike has something to do with the Hamas and Israel conflict.
All right. Let me now bring in Major General Sanjay Meston. Major General Sanjay Meston, sir, firstly, your thoughts on, the growing tensions between Pakistan and Iran. Even though, our Pakistani guest says that it doesn't really come as a surprise, but fact of the matter is that the timing is worrying for everyone. And then I've talked about how there have been innumerable developments in the Middle East that seem to suggest that the conflict is widening, whether it is the attacks by the Houthis or the attacks on the Houthis by the US, whether it is the US going after targets in Iraq and Syria, whether it is Iran going after Iraq. The two countries who've traditionally had strong ties are also at loggerheads, and Baghdad has recalled its envoy from Tehran. So there is just so much happening right now. Can we really say that this has nothing to do with the Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza? I mean, given that the Houthis have publicly said that they are doing this in solidarity with Hamas, we know that Hezbollah has been engaged in exchange of fire with Israel because of the Hamas war, and then behind all these entities is Iran.
Neha, good evening. I think the situation is very, very complex and too dynamic. My take, there are three issues you have raised. The first issue basically is the Pakistan-Iran, whatever has happened. I agree with the Pakistani guest. Firstly, these kind of border skirmishes and issues have been going on. Having been in Afghanistan as a defense attaché, and I am aware about it. So these kind of things have happened. However, what Pakistan may do, see, Pakistan has already done something which they had to do. They have expelled the ambassador, and so they have recalled also their own ambassador. So that is an immediate action they have taken, because see, we must remember Pakistan is also going to have the elections now, and they have to cater for their domestic people, because whatever it is, the Pakistan's sovereignty and airspace violation has taken place. Now this has been blown up, and it is today in all media. So therefore, the pressure on Pakistan would be there to take some action. Now, whether they take a diplomatic action, yes, they have taken. The second option is economic action. I really wonder what kind of economic action they can take. But the third action is the military response. I think some kind of a minor thing they may try, some kind of a little skirmish, because see, they have to tell their people of Pakistan that Pakistan is not going to accept the violation of the airspace. Though Pakistan's airspace has always been violated. I remember in 2012, the Americans had struck a Pakistani post, I think it was Sarala, for about 23 Pakistani frontier corps people were killed. Then Bin Laden also, the US had gone right inside and killed Bin Laden. So the airspace violation of Pakistan airspace has always been there. And now this is the latest, but of course by Iran, who they are neighbors, they have good relationship also, but it's a blow hot, blow cold relationship. So how it manifests, yes, the diplomatic action has been taken, military action may or may not be taken. I doubt they'll take some major military action in terms of, launching missiles or drones. Now coming on to the other fact, that the developments in Middle East is the conflict widening. See, I personally feel now it's more than 100 days the war started between Israel and Hamas. The conflict, it appears, is widening, including, see, now if you come on to, as a military man, I would say, let's analyze firstly on the land. As on land today, including Pakistan, whatever has happened last evening, 8 countries are now feeling the impact of the war directly. Missiles have been launched, or missiles have been drones, etc. So there have been targeting. On the sea front, both in the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, the sea is also been engulfed. So what I want to say, it is enlarging, but yet I feel that it will remain at a particular threshold level. It will not escalate, because no country, whether it is Israel, whether it is Iran, whether it is America, whether it is United States, would like escalation. This is not going to be the interest of any of these countries. So they will keep it at a particular threshold level. The fighting between Israeli and Hamas will continue. Houthis will continue to take their action, and Iran, whatever they are using, their proxies, they continue. And whatever has happened in Syria and Iraq and Pakistan, I think a particular threshold level will be maintained. There will be more diplomatic activities. And I really don't see it going escalation to such a battle until and unless tomorrow some big miscalculation takes place, either American or UK. Some targeting is done in some neutral country where a lot of people are killed, the American citizens, then it will definitely take a wrong turn. But I think all countries would avoid that. And the last question is about, Houthis' solidarity with the Palestinians. See, I do agree. But I will raise a very fundamental question. Look at the economic state of Yemen. Look at the economic state of the Hamas or the Palestinian territory. And look at the economic state of Lebanon. Now, these countries, though they claim, and their proxies, they claim that they support Palestinian cause, but actually, besides only arming them or militarizing, leading to military action, what have they really done for the Palestinian cause in the last, I would say, 2 decades? None of them, including Iran. What have they done? Except that they want to just use their proxies and start and declare. All of them declare that they do not recognize Israel as a state. They just want to wipe it off a map. So what kind of Palestinian support are they given? You look at Hamas, Gaza, the kind of tunnel network has been done. So much money has been spent there. Why couldn't that money be utilized by the Palestinian Authority or the Hamas, who are actually also governing that place, to give education, to build infrastructure? It's only tunnels. And today they are losing their own people also, whatever it is. They are losing so many. So it's a very moralistic question to be raised. Support has to be in some other form. And let me tell you, as a military man, at the end of the day, war does not resolve anything. It is dialogue and diplomacy which has to be resolved. And that is why there are organizations like United Nations, of course, now that has become more or less defunct. But these organizations, and another point to note is, why so many of the Arab countries have cozied up relationship with Israel, despite, the Palestinian cause is there. So there has to be an internal analysis by most of the countries. Support does not mean you
Saudi Arabia had nearly normalized its ties with Israel before the war erupted, and even now they've issued a statement, we will recognize Israel, but now of course they're saying that there's a precondition that the Palestinian statehood issue must be resolved. Hold that thought, Major General Sanjay Meston. I need to take a quick break here. I'll request all my guests to stay on with us. We will return in just a couple of minutes to continue this discussion.
वर्ष 2070 तक भारत नेट जीरो का लक्ष्य हासिल करेगा.
There is certainly a wall of capital coming into the clean tech, climate tech space, not just in India but across the world.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
It was my 14th birthday.
On birthday, daughter waits
Home missing father.
He was carrying a cake for his daughter.
49-year-old Birmingham-based
Indian diplomat vanishes.
He was grabbed and bundled into a car by 4 assailants.
KLA claims responsibility, demands Kashmiri separatists.
Maqbool Bhatt's release.
Goli maro, aur phek do.
And within 3 days, they shot him dead.
Abducted diplomat.
Found murdered in Leicestershire.
I said, who ordered to kill him? To me, he said, yes, I ordered it.
And he never came home.
searching, start streaming. Download the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
And the state has not been able to handle that part of its own responsibilities.
It's not the fiefdom of politicians. They owe it to the people.
Everybody is as good a citizen as we.
As a Telangana person, I will not accept his leadership.
What was worrying was the stories that were coming from the Congress that there was internal sabotage.
You can't straight away give 12%. There is no provision.
Exactly.
You need to do a lot of other things.
Yeah, just because they are tribal, everyone does it.
Wait.
That's my problem. How do ordinary folks deal with this? Think about it. Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. We're talking about the growing tensions between Pakistan and Iran, and also fears that the Israel-Hamas war that's raging in Gaza may in fact be widening into a bigger regional conflict in the Middle East. Before I go back to my panel, I just want to read out for our viewers what Pakistan's caretaker Information Minister Murtaza Solanki has said. He has called the airspace violation by Iran a sad incident. In fact, he says, let me just quickly read out his statement. He says there's a history of cordial relations between Iran and Pakistan. This is a sad incident. The government of Pakistan has responded. We've taken some measures and we are assessing the situation. We're in the process of investigating what happened, who is responsible for it, despite the claims that have been made, but we would not rush to any judgment. And he says the so-called Jaish al-Adl group, which is an Iranian terrorist group, was targeted in this attack that left 2 people dead in Balochistan. All right, let me now go across to our Pakistani guest first. Nusrat Amin, you heard what the caretaker Information Minister of Pakistan has said. He actually says that, you know, traditionally the 2 countries have had cordial ties and therefore this is a sad incident. You, of course, disagree. So does Major General Sanjay Meston. You refer to how, there have been tensions on and off between the 2 countries. But just looking at the larger picture for a moment, Israel blames not just Hamas, but Iran for what happened on the 7th of October, those unprecedented terror attacks on Israel that resulted in the war in Gaza. Israel says it is not just Hamas that has been fully trained, funded and supported by Iran, but then Iran uses other militant organizations such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi rebels in Yemen and other such entities in the region to wage a proxy war against Israel. How does Pakistan see this?
Pakistan has a very clear view over Israel. There is, unlike some of the Middle Eastern countries who are supposed to going for accepting Israel as an independent state, Pakistan there is no movement or there is no plans with the government of Pakistan or the state of Pakistan to accept Israel as a state so far till this day. And as far as Hamas and Israel conflict is concerned, once again Pakistan is very clear about it. They are not really supporting Hamas attacks, but of course they have been strongly condemning what Israeli forces have been doing, committing atrocity with the Palestinians and depriving them from all basics and necessity of life, apart from taking so many lives over there.
Okay, well, there is no doubt that Israel has got a lot of criticism from around the world now over the growing death toll in Gaza. More than 24,000 Palestinians have been killed in this 100-day war, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. But, Mr. Amin, what does Pakistan feel about Israel's claim that it is Iran which is behind all of this?
I think better ask Mr. Murtaza Solanki what does the caretaker government think over it. But there is nothing on document what actually Pakistan think or view over the allegation of some covert support on part of Iran for the groups that have been targeting Israel.
All right. So let me go back to our Israeli guest, Itai Melchior. Itai Melchior, of course, you know, our Pakistani guest has said that, you know, the government of Pakistan has no plans of recognizing the state of Israel. Now, that, of course, is, you know, an old issue, and this is true of a lot of countries in the Middle East. But coming back to the fear of a widening conflict. You know, I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that when Iran carried out strikes in Iraq, it said that it was targeting what it called a spy base for Israel's intelligence agency Mossad in Erbil in northern Iraq. So, it brings me back to the original question that I asked. We can hardly say that there is not an Israel angle or a direct Israel-Hamas war dimension to some of the more recent conflicts that we've seen emerging in the Middle East.
Yes, so many questions and not enough answers all time. I will say this. First of all, to my Pakistani colleague, Mr. Amin, James Bond once said, never say never. I don't think many people thought that relations between Israel and Morocco and Sudan, where the three no's were declared by the Arab League, will ever look like they look today, and that Saudi Arabia is on the verge of normalizing with Israel. And as I was a top negotiator, there are more countries who are exploring this. So that is on that issue. But back to the question of regional. So first of all, I don't want to scare you, but there are many other conflicts taking place as we speak now, very close to the Middle East. We've got a civil war in Sudan. We have rising tension in northern Ethiopia with Somalia because of the Somaliland relation, and in the Tigray region. We have issues between Algeria and Morocco. We have issues in Russia and Ukraine. And now, after the elections in Taiwan, we don't even know what's going to happen between China and Taiwan.
I promise nobody is blaming Israel for those. I promise nobody is blaming Israel for those conflicts.
I appreciate that, Neha. But back to our small pond here in the region. Again, as I said before, Iran claims the attack on Iraq was an attack on Mossad entities, but according to the Iraqi reports, there were a businessman killed and a few of his family members, and there's even been hints that they were actually using this to settle some score, some business scores or whatever. For sure, they didn't say, the Iranians, that the attack on Pakistan, I hope they're not saying that the attack on Pakistan was against Mossad, because I don't think Mossad is in Pakistan, nor in Syria. So therefore, there is, that's why I want to recount on what I said before and say maybe there is a line, but it is the one country that is perpetrating this and using Israel as a pretext for some of it. But if you remember, when we started speaking about the Houthis said they are going to target Israeli-owned ships. Then they said they will target any ship that is headed to Israel. Then they shot the ship that was heading from Turkey to India with no Israeli ties whatsoever. And since then, they've started indiscriminately firing at ships that are sailing in the sea. So it's clear to see that there's an aggressor here who initiated the attack on Israel from Hamas, and now controlling its proxies from other regions. And I think the common thread here is that this actor sees that there's no real consequence, because while Israel is being attacked and is trying to defend itself and fighting in Gaza, it is being blamed and accused, as you said, for atrocities. And meanwhile, like a magician with a sleight of hand, when everybody's looking one way, then the magician is doing something totally else to confuse us. For example, attack on Pakistan, killing children, which has nothing to do, but I think they've seen that they can get away with murder, literally get away with murder, and that the world reaction is not holding them accountable. We see it in many other things also, like their relations with the IAEA, the Atomic Board, and etc. So really, there's a rouge actor here that is not playing by the rules. They're using proxies or itself doing stuff, and in the meanwhile, he's pointing finger and saying, "Look at what Israel is doing." So this is worrying, because if the bad guys can get away with what they're doing, if terrorists can get away by hiding in civilian population, if countries can get away by hiding behind proxies, we know just this week the Americans caught a ship full of Iranian arms headed for the Houthis.
Okay.
If someone can get away with this, that is a common denominator.
Okay, but I need to ask you a follow-up question. You know, you talked about how Iran has murdered 2 children in Pakistan, and you know it's getting away with terror activities. You know, I hold no brief for Iran, but I'm just quoting what the country has said, what the IRGC has said. They say that they went after this terror group called Jaish al-Adl, which has been responsible for carrying out multiple attacks on Iranian security forces along the Pakistan-Iran border. So my question is that I'm not trying to draw an equivalence, but I still need to ask you this question. You know, you're accusing Iran of murder, but as you're aware, countries like South Africa have accused you, Israel, of carrying out a genocide, and that matter is now before the International Court of Justice. If Israel says that we will go after Hezbollah commanders and Hamas commanders wherever we need to root out terrorism, and well, then Iran can very well turn around and say that's exactly what we've done in Pakistan. These guys have been attacking our soldiers.
Exactly. I mean, you are taking my point now. So I've lived in South Africa for more than 5 years. I know the country well, and we know for a fact the Iranian involvement also in this law case, which is actually helping Iran. But maybe we should get the IRCG spokesperson to come work for us and explain that if a foreign terrorist organization is incursioning into your country and attacking, this gives you permission to strike back. And yes, there could be, I don't know the details of the case, and I don't really know how careful the Iranians are. I know that we are trying to be, but yes, there are civilian casualties in such a case. So maybe the ICG spokesman should work for us.
Okay, you know, it's interesting you're expressing outrage, and I'm not for a second minimizing the loss of a single life. Every life is precious. But, you know, you're expressing outrage over the loss of 2 lives in Pakistan. But when we talk about the 24,000 Palestinians who are dead in Gaza, unfortunately, the stance of most Israelis is these things happen in a war, it's collateral damage. And that is an argument that, Mr. Melchior, nobody in the world seems to be buying anymore outside of Israel and the United States. And even your closest ally, the United States, is increasingly uncomfortable, by the way, with the growing death toll in Gaza. But let me go back. Okay. Okay.
So, but on this, speaking about Hague, and I've worked before on cases related to Hague, both the ICC and the ICJ, which is in question now. Again, I'm not expressing rage at what Iran did because I don't know the details. I don't know if they shot in a camp of the terrorist organization and there happened to be children there, or if they aimed at civilians like Hamas did when it attacked Israel, aiming at civilians, or just this week, a mother and son killed by a direct line of sight Hezbollah rocket into Israel, which had line of sight and knew it was civilians. So I'm expressing outrage at the double standards, Niha. My problem is that the world is trying to act holier than the Pope, and blaming us for what they know is something we cannot do otherwise. No army, and you will have many top generals that will explain this to you, that no army has gone to such extent to avoid collateral damage in enemy, but also no terrorist organization or country has ever used in such a brutal way its own civilians, its own hospitals, schools, mosques,
of course,
to use them. And then what can you do? So my outrage is against the double standards and against people who really think that we can
my
just
limited
point
point there is there can be no remote justification for what Hamas did in Israel on the 7th of October or for the way it treats its own people, the Palestinians, often as human shields in Gaza. However, that is a terror organization that we're talking about. Israel is supposed to be a civilized, responsible, liberal democracy which is expected to conduct itself better than a terror organization. And also, I cannot understand for the life of me, and nor can most other people today, how the deaths of 24,000 Palestinians, thousands of whom we are told were women and children, can be dismissed as collateral damage. And many are asking, is this something that is going to haunt Israel for a long time to come? The world is bound to ask questions of Israel. But let me go back to our Indian guest at this point, Major General Sanjay Meston. You know, we've talked endlessly about the blame that lies with Israel for the growing death toll in Gaza. You know, we hear the same arguments and counter arguments every time. But I want to keep the focus again on the bigger picture. You said that there are at least 8 countries in the Middle East today that seem to have been impacted directly by the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. The question is, sir, how do you see this panning out in the days and weeks ahead? Because even though we've had many people saying, we don't need to worry about it, this is going to remain contained, but does it really look like it remains contained?
A very good question raised, Neha. See, the way things are going on, 8 countries directly affected, scope has enlarged, but again, as I mentioned, every country would desire that it remains below a particular threshold, because it's not going to be advantageous to anyone. However, if any of the non-state actors, I repeat non-state actors, if they do some miscalculations, for example, if the Houthis target some Americans or other Western countries, some citizens, normal citizens, take them captive, start beheading them, then it can take a different dimension, and therefore then it may escalate. Now, the way things are going on, see, it is impacted, especially the situation in the sea has impacted, I think, the entire globe. You just watch within 2 to 3 months, the prices of all commodities in the entire world is going to be extremely high. Even in India, for example, the oil, Russian oil, which is now coming through Mediterranean and Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, today even those ships will be targeted. We are aware what is happening in the Persian Gulf. In fact, 2 of our merchant ships were also targeted, and Americans stated that it was a Iranian drone attack. Now, the way complexities are going on, any miscalculation by anyone, tomorrow an Indian ship gets targeted, Indian crew is there. India cannot just sit quiet, we'll have to respond. So everyone is doing wait and watch. I really do not know how it is going to pan out. Sometimes it appears optimistic, things may improve, but sometimes it results into a very pessimistic situation. Americans and UK have launched some of their missile drones, and they have attacked Yemen, basically the Houthi strong-held area. But it's not really making an impact, because no army with the missiles and drones can damage the entire infrastructure. You look even in Israel-Hamas. So far, even very recently, the Hamas has been firing rockets from Gaza. So what it implies is that, whatever military action even the Americans take in Yemen, and they get even people in Djibouti, NATO and everything, it is going to be a very, very complex situation. So I feel threshold level will be maintained until and unless someone does a big miscalculation. Then it will spiral out of control. It is going to affect the whole globe.
It will.
The entire trade.
And the economic cost of this, as you said, is going to be borne by the entire world. There is no doubt about that, because 15% of the global sea traffic goes through the Red Sea, which has now been severely impacted by the Houthi strikes. I'll give the final word to Nusrat Amin, our Pakistani guest. Mr. Amin, how does Pakistan react to Israel's claim that, I beg your pardon, to Iran's claim that it went after a particular terror organization in Baluchistan because this terror organization had targeted its security forces along the Pakistan-Iran border? Now, we all know what happened, what the Americans did with Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad.
Yeah, I think they have a precedence to follow. But unfortunately for them, they are not Americans. Maybe the intention is to make an airstrike and pick the people they want and bury them into some ocean. The Arabian Sea is the nearest one. Anyway, I think I don't think Pakistan, Iranian government has been blaming such groups hiding and operating from Pakistan side into Iran and the security forces at the border. The Iranian security personnel have been targeted according to them. And Pakistan, we don't have any kind of documented response to this allegation so far.
All right, we will leave it at that. I'd like to thank Nusrat Amin, Itai Melchior and Major General Sanjay Meston for joining me on Global Lens. Thanks very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, now as we wrap up this edition of Global Lens, let's get you a report from Davos. Political and business leaders continue to hold talks at the 54th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos. 60 heads of state, including French President Emmanuel Macron, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres are already in Davos or expected to arrive in the Swiss Alps over the next few days.
Dozens of world leaders and hundreds of company bosses are expected in Davos. This year's agenda is dominated by Russia's war in Ukraine and the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and Chinese Premier Li Qiang are coming, along with politicians from Israel, Qatar, Lebanon and Iran. Who talks to whom behind the scenes remains to be seen. But it is indeed an opportunity for dialogue.
Times like this make it more important, not less. What you have is the world's decision makers all together. And my hope is just by not the coordinated interaction of people in meetings, but the random interaction of people through an event like this will lead to positive change, collaboration, partnerships.
The big topic this year is artificial intelligence, which is not only changing the way we work, but also affecting nearly every aspect of our lives.
AI, I think, is an unexpectedly powerful technology, and that has enormous potential for increasing productivity, improving health and well-being, but the same technologies also have some enormous risks in misinformation or even for catastrophic risks. So you have to balance those. I'm optimistic that we're going to use AI for those beneficial purposes, but we also need to be cautious.
Yet inequality continues to grow worldwide. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. Artificial intelligence could either accelerate or help put the brakes on this trend.
Putin embodies war. We all know that he is the sole reason why various wars and conflicts persist and why all attempts to restore peace have failed, and he will not change. He will not change. We must change. If anyone thinks this is only about us, this is only about Ukraine, they are fundamentally mistaken. possible directions and even timeline of a new Russian aggression beyond Ukraine become more and more obvious.
That was the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressing the World Economic Forum in Davos yesterday, predictably calling Putin a predator. Well, that's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. If you have been, thanks so much for watching. Do join us at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye.
$392 pillars, 44 doors. Prime Minister prays ahead of the big moment. Special rituals in Ayodhya. All eyes on Ramlala.
पूरी दुनिया उत्सुकता के साथ 22 जनवरी के ऐतिहासिक क्षण का इंतजार कर रही है।
प्राण प्रतिष्ठा।